Nick rejects Victoria's summer plan. The Young and the Restless update for Monday, February 23rd, reveals that Nick Newman will have a problem with Victoria Newman's strategy while Noah Newman rips into Audra Charles for being complicit in Billy Abbott's move against the Newmans. At the athletic club, Noah will cross paths with Audra at the bar, where these consorts will enjoy drinks and get nearly coquettish. Audra will tell Noah about landing her dream job, so he'll be excited for her until she learns she's partnering up with Sally Spectra. Since Billy stole Newman media for Sally, Noah will cloud over Audra's new morning coming at the Newmans' expenditure. Kyle Abbott will arrive and tease Audra curtly, but he'll ultimately have no problem with Victor Newman and Adam Newman facing a good cure of air. It'll catch Audra off guard when she realizes Kyle actually agrees with her about commodity. At the coffee house, Chelsea Lawson will rip into Sally for keeping Billy's Newman media gift, but Sally will suggest it's beyond her control since that's what Billy and the investors arranged. Sally will just want to concentrate on Spectra Charles Media's future, but Chelsea will suppose they should join forces to save Billy from the Newman's fury. Chelsea will get news on Sally's split from Billy and realize he refused to put her first. Sally won't believe Chelsea really cares about Billy's well-being in all this and will suspect this is father about conniving to take back control of Newman Media. Chelsea will eventually get a bit nasty as she warns about the terrible goods that could be if Sally doesn't help to fix this. Sally will realize Chelsea is tossing risks around like a true Newman, so she'll feel like Chelsea fits right in with that family. At the Newman estate on Monday's Y&R occasion, Victoria will notice that Nick is acting rather mellow and feel surprised by it. Nick will claim he took a pain capsule and that he's feeling better. There'll be a discussion about Victoria's plan to fly to Milan and turn Summer against Phyllis, especially since she's formally angry with her ma. Victoria will want to subsidize on that and move Summer to hang to cut off contact. Victoria will suggest Summer can perhaps covenant to keep Harrison Abbott down from Phyllis, too. However, Victoria will suggest everything can go back to normal, if they can get Phyllis to back down. Nick won't like the idea of putting Summer in the middle of the drama since she's got her own happy life in Italy. Still, Victoria will suppose this is serious business since all this could take a threat on Victor and rush him into the grave. Although Victoria will push Nick to fly with her to Milan and help handle Summer, he'll refuse. Victoria will still plan to leave tonight, but Nick will move her to delay her trip until the coming day and give him an occasion to come up with another plan. Nick's leg pain will flare over on him again, so Victoria will quiz him about that and his hurtless capsule since he's acting out of feathers. The Young and the Restless spoilers say Nick's dependence plot will come with some twists and turns, so don't miss what's in store. On the Monday, February 23rd occasion of The Young and the Restless, Genoa City coddled with pressure as commitment were tested, old injuries restarted, and new power plays hovered to fracture the Newman dynasty from within. At the center of it all stood Nick Newman, suddenly restrained and decreasingly equivocal, as he set up himself at odds with his family. Victoria Newman's bold, and arguably reckless, strategy involving Summer Newman and Phyllis Summers. What began as a advised commercial initiative snappily entwined into a deeply particular battle, exposing vulnerabilities in nearly every corner of the oil. The drama unfolded first at the athletic club, where Noah Newman crossed paths with Audra Charles at the bar. There was an inarguable spark in the air as they changed sportful badinage over drinks, the mood nearly coquettish as they disregarded and flirted around the edges of undetermined chemistry. Audra, glowing with excitement, participated the news that she had landed what she considered her dream job. For a moment, Noah was authentically thrilled for her. He'd always admired Audra's ambition, her turn down to play small, and her capability to rise from lapses with indeed sharper focus. But that warmth snappily cooled when he learned the details she'd be partnering with Sally Spectra at Spectra Charles Media, a adventure made possible only because Billy Abbott had effectively stolen Newman Media out from under the Newmans to hand it over to Sally. Noah's expression darkened as the counter-accusations sank in. What Audra saw as a career advance, he saw as a direct blow to his family. In his eyes, Billy's move wasn't just business, it was an act of aggression against Victor Newman and everything the Newman name represented. And by aligning herself with that adventure, Audra was, whether she liked it or not, complicit. He didn't sugarcoat it. Noah ripped into her, criminating her of serving from a treason. He questioned how she could celebrate a palm erected on what he considered a hostile preemption. Audra, no way one to back down, defended herself. She argued that she didn't orchestrate Billy's move. She simply accepted an occasion placed in front of her. In her mind, business was business, and survival in Genoa City needed rigidity, not saccharinity. Their argument boosted when Kyle Abbott arrived. With his usual boo and sharp timing, Kyle teased Audra about her new cooperation, easily enjoying the irony of the situation. But when the discussion shifted toward Victor Newman and Adam Newman potentially facing a reversal, Kyle surprised Audra. Rather than flaunting, he admitted he didn't inescapably have a problem with Victor and Adam getting a cure of fresh air, a chance to be challenged for formally. It caught Audra off guard. She had anticipated Kyle to carouse in Newman discomfort, but rather he struck a more measured tone, suggesting that unbounded power infrequently led to healthy competition. For a brief moment, Audra felt validated. Someone differently saw this not purely as vengeance, but as request correction. Across city at Crimson Lights, pressures of a different flavor brewed between Chelsea Lawson and Sally Spectra. Chelsea brazens Sally with stewing fury, criminating her of keeping Billy's so-called gift of Newman media without considering the fallout. Chelsea claimed that by accepting the company, Sally had placed a target on her back, and on Billy's as well. Sally pushed back, arguing that the arrangement had been structured by Billy and the investors. She hadn't manipulated anyone. She had simply stepped into a leadership part that aligned with her professional pretensions. Sally emphasized that her focus was on erecting Spectra Charles Media into commodity sustainable and innovative, not engaging in endless Newman wars. But Chelsea wasn't buying it. She proposed that they should join forces to cover Billy from the ineluctable wrath of Victor Newman. In Chelsea's view, Victor would no way allow this personality to stand. She painted a picture of retribution, commercial sabotage, fiscal pressure, reputational damage. Sally, still, snappily realized that Chelsea's concern might not be entirely humanitarian. When Chelsea learned that Billy had resolved from Sally because he refused to prioritize her above his vendettas, Chelsea's eyes flitted with commodity more complicated than sympathy. Sally indicted her of wanting control back, of seeing this extremity as an occasion to reclaim influence over Newman media. The discussion turned sharp. Chelsea advised Sally about the terrible goods that could unfold if she didn't act to alleviate the situation. It sounded less like advice and more like a trouble. Sally coolly observed that Chelsea was tossing risks around like a true Newman, manipulative, strategic, and unapologetically ruthless. The irony wasn't lost on her. Chelsea might not carry the Newman name, but she was beginning to embody its most aggressive traits. The battle ended without resolution, but the lines were easily drawn. Meanwhile, at the Newman estate, Victoria Newman studied her family with growing concern. Nick sounded surprisingly mellow, nearly detached. He claimed he'd taken a pain capsule for his moping leg injury and was feeling better. But Victoria tasted commodity was out. Nick Newman was infrequently this subdued when family heads impended. And extremity was precisely what she believed they were facing. Victoria laid out her plan with commercial perfection. She intended to fly to Milan, where Summer was living her new life, and influence her son's being wrathfulness toward Phyllis. Summer had formerly been frustrated with her murmurous hindrance and dramatic tendencies. Victoria believed that frustration could be diverted, stoned into a strategic wedge. However, it would insulate Phyllis and potentially force her to back down from whatever reckless scheme she was brewing next, if Summer could be induced to cut off contact with Phyllis. Victoria went indeed further. She suggested that Summer might agree to keep Harrison Abbott at a distance from Phyllis as well, limiting her grandmother's access and influence. It was a bold move, using family dynamics as influence in a larger power struggle. Victoria framed it as necessary containment. However, she might retreat if Phyllis felt cornered. And if she didn't, the Newmans would at least have reduced her emotional security. Nick bristled incontinently. He abominated the idea of dragging Summer into the crossfire. His son had eventually set up stability in Italy, a fresh start down from Genoa City's endless turbulence. Pulling her back into drama felt cruel and gratuitous. He argued that Summer merited to live her life without being weaponized in a commercial feud. But Victoria combated with urgency. This wasn't just about pride or business. She believed the raising pressure could jeopardize Victor's health. The stress, the treason, the constant battles, they were taking a toll. However, she advised, it could rush him into the grave if Victor were pushed too far. That statement landed heavily. Family fidelity ran deep for Nick, indeed when he dissented with his father's styles. But still, he refused to board an aeroplane to Milan. He'd not ambush his son emotionally to break a problem created by grown-ups. Victoria, frustrated, blazoned she'd leave that very night without him. Nick prompted her to delay until the following day, giving him time to concoct an indispensable plan, commodity less manipulative, less invasive. As the argument boosted, Nick's leg pain burned again. Victoria noticed the shift incontinently. She questioned whether the pain capsule was truly helping, or if he was counting on it too heavily. Nick brushed off her concern, but his perversity spiked. He sounded slightly out of feathers, further reactive than usual. Victoria's dubitation strengthened. Was his mellow address before truly from drug? Or was commodity additional brewing beneath the face? The occasion subtly planted seeds of a new plot: Nick's implicit dependence on pain drug. What began as treatment for illicit injury might evolve into commodity more complicated. His emotional volatility, his guard, his symptomatic passivity, they suggested at a man floundering to maintain control. As night fell over Genoa City, alliances remained uncertain. Noah's faith in Audra had been shaken. Chelsea and Sally stood on contrary sides of a fragile armistice. Victoria prepared to take drastic action in the name of family preservation. And Nick, caught between fidelity and heart, faced not only a strategic dilemma but a particular vulnerability that could unravel him from within. Looking ahead, the stakes will only rise. However, she risks alienating both her family and her bastard. If Victoria proceeds to Milan without Nick's blessing, however, his judgment could falter at a critical moment, if Nick's pain operation spirals into reliance. And if Billy Abbott continues to provoke the Newmans through Spectra Charles Media, Victor's retribution may be nippy and merciless. In Genoa City, power is no way stationary. It shifts with every treason, every secret, every calculated move. Monday's occasion underlined that indeed within the redoubtable Newman conglomerate, consanity is fragile. And when family becomes strategy, the consequences infrequently remain confined to the boardroom. The Young and the Restless spoilers promise twists and turns in Nick's dependence plot, raising pressures between the Newmans and their rivals, and emotional fallout that could review several connections. In a city where fidelity is currency and love frequently doubles as influence, the coming days may prove that the topmost pitfalls aren't external adversaries but the fractures forming within the family itself. As the night strengthened in Genoa City, the emotional foreshocks of the day's competitions continued to ripple outward, touching nearly every major player connected to the Newman conglomerate. On this vital February 23rd investiture of the Young and the Restless, what sounded at first like a contained commercial disagreement was steadily transubstantiating into a multi-layered war involving heritage, fidelity, and particular survival. At the Newman estate, Victoria stood alone for a long time after Nick left the room, gaping out at the darkened grounds. The estate had always represented strength and permanence, the imperturbable core of the Newman dynasty. But recently, indeed those walls felt fragile. Billy Abbott's bold initiative with Newman Media hadn't only embarrassed the family intimately, it had exposed vulnerabilities. Victoria flattered herself on strategic foresight, yet this had slipped past her. The sting of that failure fueled her urgency regarding Summer. In Victoria's mind, this wasn't manipulation. It was protection. Phyllis Summers had always been changeable, brilliant, yes, but driven by emotion. However, she didn't just avenge, she exploded if Phyllis felt wronged. Victoria believed segregating her would remove her influence. Summer, presently thriving in Milan with her son Harrison Abbott, represented Phyllis's emotional anchor. Ramify that connection, indeed temporarily, and maybe Phyllis would be forced to reassess her tactics. But Nick saw it else. Alone in his auto after leaving the estate, he gripped the steering wheel as another sharp surge of pain shot up his leg. The injury had been manageable at first, an annoyance further than anything. Yet lately, the flare-ups were sharper, more pertinacious. The pain tablets dulled the pangs snappily, too snappily. He abominated how important he anticipated that relief. His studies drifted to Summer. He pictured her laughing in the Milan sun, free from the constant hall of war between her parents and the Newmans. She had fought hard for independence. Dragging her back into chaos felt like treason. Nick had spent times trying to break cycles, to be a different kind of father than Victor had been. Weaponizing his son's feelings contradicted everything he claimed to stand for. Back at the athletic club, the pressure between Noah and Audra refused to dissipate. After Kyle stepped down to take a call, Noah lowered his voice but not his intensity. He indicted Audra of attributing opportunism as ambition. Audra combated that she refused to limit her implicit because of Newman pride. She reminded him that the Newmans had infrequently dithered to crush challenges when it suited them. Why was it suddenly immoral when the tables turned? Noah's jaw tensed. There's a difference between competition and treason, he claimed. Audra's eyes flashed. Only if you're the bone. Being betrayed. The comment landed heavily. Their history complicated everything. There had formerly been genuine affection between them, but trust had always been a fault line. Tonight proved it hadn't healed. Noah couldn't attune his moping passions with what he perceived as disloyalty. Audra couldn't accept being judged for making a strategic career move. When Kyle returned, he tried to lighten the atmosphere, but indeed he tasted the shift. Latterly, as he and Audra walked out together, Kyle admitted intimately that Victor Newman's dominance had shaped Genoa City for decades. Occasionally dislocation is necessary, he said courteously. It forces elaboration. Audra studied him precisely. You're not upset about retribution. Kyle scowled noiselessly. I'm an abbot. I was born awaiting retribution. Across city, Sally Spectra sat alone at Crimson Lights long after Chelsea stormed out. The cafe had quieted, leaving her alone with her studies. Billy's absence counted on her more heavily than she wanted to admit. Their bifurcation still felt raw. He'd chosen vengeance over stability, ambition over cooperation. And yet, she understood him. Billy thrived on rebellion. Handing Newman media to her had been both romantic and reckless. Chelsea's warning echoed in her mind. The Newmans would not ignore this. Victor Newman, especially, didn't forgive demotion. Sally had faced Victor's fury ahead. It was cold, strategic, grim. Aligning with Audra might strengthen Spectra Charles' media creatively, but it also painted a larger target on both their tails. When Sally eventually returned to her office, she set up Audra formally there, reviewing protrusions. The two women changed a look, part solidarity, part participated anxiety. Audra streamlined her on the battle with Noah and Kyle. Sally heeded precisely. They are spooked, Audra concluded. That's why they're pushing back so hard. Sally wasn't entirely induced, it was fear. It felt more like a brewing storm. Meanwhile, at the Newman estate, Victoria made a call to the Newman Spurt airman, tentatively cataloguing a morning departure rather of leaving that night. Nick's plea to delay had unsettled her further than she wanted to admit. She trusted her instincts, but she also knew her family's moral compass frequently refocused nearly steadier than her own. Victor Newman entered the room suddenly, his presence commanding as ever. Indeed, without raised volume, his voice carried authority. He questioned Victoria about the late-night arrangements. She briefed him on her Milan strategy. Victor heeded quietly, hands clasped behind his reverse. When she finished, he offered neither immediate praise nor review. Rather, he asked one simple question: will this strengthen the family, or fracture it? Victoria dithered. She believed it would strengthen them in the long term. Indeed, if the short term proved uncomfortable. Victor advised her that using family as influence always left scars. Control achieved through pressure infrequently lasts, he said still. The comment dallied with her long after he left. Nick, meanwhile, returned home and set up himself gaping at the tradition bottle in his hand. He accounted his use the pain was licit, the lozenge controlled. But when he realized he was calculating how soon he could take another capsule, apprehension crept by. He set the bottle down strongly, frustrated with himself. The coming morning actualized with pressure hanging in the air like fog. Victoria arrived at the estate beforehand, awaiting to finalize trip plans. Rather, she set up Nick formally there. He looked tired but bent. I spoke to someone in Milan, he began. Summer's doing well. Harrison's thriving. Phyllis hasn't caused any dislocations lately. Victoria folded her arms. That doesn't mean she won't. No, Nick agreed. But perhaps we handle Phyllis then, without dragging Summer into it. Victoria pressed him. And how do you propose we neutralize her? Nick suggested defying the root issue, opening direct dialogue with Phyllis rather of segregating her. He argued that pushing her down would only consolidate her need to avenge. Victoria remained skeptical. Phyllis had a long history of raising conflict. Away? Chelsea